Well, a very good evening to you and welcome to Unfiltered. I am Criselda Lewis. Now, tonight on the show, we speak to former IPID boss Robert McBride. Now, McBride is challenging Parliament's recent decision not to renew his contract. He says Parliament was acting under political pressure. And also on the show tonight, we'll also speak to the former acting National Police Commissioner Phahlane, who is currently on bail following his arrest for fraud on Friday. He claims there's a witch hunt against him. We're also going to welcome Dr. Johan Berger, who is a consultant with the Institute for Security Studies. Now, Mr. McBride will join us a bit later on the show. A very good evening to you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. I think former acting National Police Commissioner Phahlane, let me start with you. Now, these are fresh allegations of fraud that you are facing. You were arrested on Friday, you appeared in court, and the case has subsequently been postponed to the 29th of March. Do you believe you have a case to answer?
Well, good evening to all. First, let's say that we need to respect the institutions of our country, the justice system, the courts, and so on. And that if any one of us has done anything wrong, or there are allegations against any one of us, irrespective of the positions we hold, we must allow due processes to take its course. I am, of course, very disturbed by the latest development and the reporting that has been going around on this matter, in that, for the first time, Thursday evening, I was called by a Mr. Sissoko, a lousy investigator from IPID, who asked me to be in court the following day, which is Friday, the 1st of March, and I accordingly presented myself in court. Now, I was shocked to learn that Phahlane was arrested in the early morning hours from his home. I drove from my house to the court because I was asked to be there, even though I did not have any reason to believe that there was any wrongdoing on my part. Arrived at the court, I asked, what am I here for? I was told there is fraud and corruption charges against you. And I wanted to understand, what is this? I was told you are joining Lieutenant General Mukwena, Lieutenant General Dilange, Major General Napo, and a Brigadier Ramanjulam that were before court late last year, where the case was postponed to the 29th. And I wanted to understand, what did I do? And ridiculously, I'm being told that as an accounting officer, I have failed to report an irregular expenditure relating to the procurement of blue lights in Gauteng province. Now, for starters, the said contract or procurement that is being referred to, first phase was 2017 March. That was an amount of 10 million, which was processed. On the 1st of June 2017, I stepped aside following my engagement with former Minister Mbalula. Then, by the end of June that same year, in other words, 2017 June, towards the end, there was a second transaction, which is just over 30 million rands. The third transaction was 2018 February, March. Yeah. I was home. Yeah. It is that particular transaction that I'm told there was irregular expenditure flowing out of. Now, if it happens while I'm at home, why am I in court? Because the irregular expenditure is in Gauteng province. Part of our processes is that when there is an irregular expenditure, the divisional commissioner or the provincial commissioner concerned will investigate. Once the investigation is done, it will be escalated to supply chain management, to the BAC, which is the committee, and that committee will process that matter. The national commissioner or the accounting officer will only get to know about such an irregular expenditure on a quarterly basis or at the end of the financial year when reports are being presented.
Now, Mr. Phahlane, that you are saying that is the basis on which you have said in your bail affidavit, I was in court at the time, where you allege that there is a witch hunt against you, and you've mentioned specific names. You say that the former IPID boss, Robert McBride, who we'll be speaking to very shortly, has been persecuting you for the longest time, and you believe that he is behind your arrest.
I mean, why will I be held responsible for an irregular expenditure which is happening while I'm sitting at home? I am not the accounting officer. If indeed that irregular expenditure happened and it is a crime, it is the current National Commissioner who is the accounting officer who should be in court.
So this is a witch hunt?
That's what I'm saying.
By Robert McBride?
I'm saying to you, the Public Finance Management Act say, if or on discovery of an irregular expenditure or on discovery of fruitless expenditure, the accounting officer must immediately report it to the National Treasury. When it relates to procurement, it must be reported to the tender board. And that is section 38(1)(g). Now, I am at home. I am not an accounting officer. And the allegation against me is that as an accounting officer, you failed to report this irregular expenditure. I can't report something which is never brought to my attention. I only got to know on Friday that there is the so-called irregular expenditure. So I'm, of course, on record as having said that for 3 years, this is the 3rd year, that I have been under investigation by IPID. I've been under investigation by Paul O'Sullivan. Both of them have been in the media space. They have spoken about my house. I'm still waiting today to hear what is wrong with my house. They have spoken about the music system. I'm still waiting. They have spoken about cars. The case was withdrawn in court.
I'll come back to you very shortly, Mr. Phahlane. Let me come to you, Dr. Berger. We will, of course, bring Mr. McBride in and he will state his case. But institutions such as this, where you have Mr. Robert McBride basically saying that he was being prevented from doing his job, and you've got on this hand Mr. Phahlane, who occupied the highest office within the South African Police Service, saying that IPID had basically had a vendetta against him under the leadership of Mr. Robert McBride. What do you make of this? And let's talk about the ramifications of this on these institutions and policing in South Africa in general.
Well, Grizel, let's just look at it the way the public sees this. It's in the media every day. There are allegations of serious criminal involvement, corruption, fraud, etc. by senior police officers. We can't talk about the merit of these cases, but this is what the public sees, what they hear all the time. I mean, we've had cases. There was a case of General Ntlhameza at the Hawks, who was eventually removed as a result of a court case. There was the case of Lieutenant General Richard Ndluli at Crime Intelligence, removed. And now you have an instance where IPID claims that they are investigating 24 cases involving mostly brigadiers, major generals, lieutenant generals. You've had an arrest last year of a number of generals. Whether these cases are legitimate criminal cases or not, the public, this is what they hear, this is what they see, that the police are riddled with senior managers who are corrupt, who are fraudulent or criminal in their behavior. So there's an absolute lack in terms of trust and confidence in the top leadership of the police. Then you have the wider department that includes IPID and its other branches. And now you have the battle between the minister and the head of IPID. And again, from the public point of view, it looks like the minister is interfering precisely to prevent the head of IPID to properly investigate these generals. So who do you believe? How do you trust the top management of this department and expect them to perform their constitutionally mandate responsibility, and that is to provide safety and security for us, for all of us.
Dr. Burger, let me come back to you, Mr. Phahlane. Look, what we do have on record is that the former IPID boss, Robert McBride, had written previously to the former NDPP, Shaun Abrahams, expressing concern about what he believed was a delay in the prosecution of some of the cases involving top officials within the South African Police Service. I know in February as well, he had also written to Shamila Batahoe, who is now in that position, also questioning those cases and asking for intervention. Did you enjoy the support of the former NDPP, Shaun Abrahams?
I don't have a reason to enjoy the support of any of the colleagues in the criminal justice system. Each and every one of us are to do the work that we are tasked to perform. And the institutions and individuals in those institutions must be allowed to act independently. I was shocked to learn in that particular article, it said McBride was begging the former National Director of Public Prosecutions. It is wrong. You don't go and beg. You investigate, you put a case before a prosecutor, allow the prosecutor to evaluate that case, and a decision must be arrived at. I am, for one, saying, let all the cases that are under investigation be presented to the National Director of Public Prosecution so that decisions could be taken. If there is wrongdoing on my part or on anyone's part, due processes must take its course. There is no reason why we should be asking for favors. We are appointed in positions of authority. We are charged with the responsibility to manage the public purse, and therefore we must account for whatever. It is. I was surprised in a charge sheet that I saw when my colleagues were before court last year. That charge sheet say they have misrepresented the facts before the accounting officer. That accounting officer at the time maybe was me, or it is the current National Commissioner. If they have misrepresented the facts against the National Commissioner or the accounting officer, is that National Commissioner or accounting officer not supposed to be a star witness? Why is that accounting officer or National Commissioner supposed to be in court? When are we going to implement policy? And I can tell you, this case, it means government will not have accounting officers, because it means if foot soldiers do something wrong there, you are going to take the Director General or the accounting officer to court, and it is wrong. That is not what the Public Finance Management Act envisaged at all.
So, Mr. Phahlane, you're saying you're not corrupt?
I'm not corrupt. I am still to be before courts. If anyone has got anything that suggests that I am corrupt, let's go to court.
All right, let's go to court, says the former Acting National Police Commissioner, Khomotso Phahlane. Let's take a short break here on Unfiltered. More when we get back. Hello again, welcome back to Unfiltered. Now joining us on the stage now is the former head of the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, Robert McBride. Of course, he's challenging Parliament's recent decision not to renew his contract. We also welcome Professor Johan Burger, who we spoke to just a very short while ago. He's a consultant, of course, with the Institute for Security Studies. Remember, you may also participate in this conversation on Facebook and Twitter by using the hashtag SABC News Unfiltered. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us, Mr. McBride, and as well as you for staying with us, Dr. Burger. Mr. McBride, this is the first time that you're speaking out on national television since this whole debacle began. Serious allegations are being levelled against you. You heard what Mr. Phahlane had to say. You basically spearheaded a witch hunt to get rid of him, and these are trumped-up charges.
Well, the decision to prosecute or not is not taken by the Independent Police Investigative Directorate. It's taken by the National Prosecuting Authority. So clearly in this case, a prosecutor who made the decision decided there was sufficient evidence to have a prosecution, so that merited a prosecution. So it had nothing to do with us. I don't get involved in all the details of an investigation. I was not even aware this was going to happen. And it's rightly so. My job is strategic guidance of the entire department to make sure it functions properly. We are the investigative oversight body for the police in terms of their conduct. So maybe he was having a bad day, and sometimes people say things they don't really mean when they're angry. So it's impossible for me to have influenced a decision by the prosecuting authority. We have the right to ask when cases that should be prosecuted, cases where decisions have been taken to prosecute and then are provisionally withdrawn and never enrolled again. We have the right to inquire as to why it was never enrolled. Yeah.
And that's exactly what you did. According to my understanding, I'd asked Mr. Phahlane about this as well. You had written to the former NDPP, Shaun Abrahams, expressing concern about a delay in cases, in particular involving high-profile individuals within the South African Police Service. If I am also correct on this particular one, you also wrote to the new NDPP, Shamila Batohi. You seem to have suggested that the likes of Mr. Phahlane had enjoyed protection from the likes of Mr. Shaun Abrahams.
Well, a typical example was a case of a series of torture instances by the same group of people in the Northwest, in which there was a decision taken to prosecute them in 2010. They appeared in court, and then the cases were provisionally withdrawn to centralize the cases. And since 2010, it was not enrolled until I started inquiring from Advocate Abrams, what is the status of these cases? So it's torture cases, and we have a human rights culture in our country. At least we should have, and we cannot be having torture continuing unabated. And they then re-enrolled the case after our inquiries over many months in 2018, and only 2 out of the 7 are now on trial. And these are the same people who General Phahlane used and enrolled to counter IPID's investigation and start a persecution of us. And hence the reason was, if the torture squad, as I used to call them, if they were prosecuted earlier, when the National Prosecuting Authority took the decision to prosecute, perhaps the sense of impunity wouldn't be with them. And that's one of the biggest problems in the police, and for lack of trust or erosion of trust in the police is a sense of impunity which the public sees the police acting.
I'll come to you, Dr. Berger. So do you believe he enjoyed protection from Shaun Abrahams, from where you are sitting?
Well, certainly there was a reluctance to prosecute a number of cases, and we took it up in writing on a number of occasions where there were no reasons or inexplicable reasons taken for withdrawal, provisional or otherwise.
All right. Dr. Berger?
I'm just worried. I think, speaking from the public perspective, if there are senior police officers arrested and criminal charges brought against them, then I think one needs to see an outcome as soon as possible. And if there are or the prosecution doesn't happen for whatever reason, I think we need to know why. Why isn't this happening? Because the initial trust was broken when the police officer was arrested. Then you wait 2 years, 3 years, there's no further development, there's no charges, or there's an arrest, but there's no eventual prosecution.
Yep.
So what then is the case? Then the claims by the person initially charged, begins to get some ring of truth, in the sense that if there was a case against me, why wasn't I prosecuted? So why, the big media attention to the arrest and the first appearance in the court, and it all dies down. So I think, again, that undermines trust and confidence. And this is what it's all about for the public, is trust and confidence in the system. IPID has a constitutional obligation to oversee and investigate the police in terms of wrongdoing. But then we need to see follow through. We need to see when there is a prima facie case that there is a prosecution. It is for the courts then to decide on the facts before them, the presentations there, whether a person then is guilty or not guilty. That is for the courts in the end to decide. But the public feels frustrated because there's no finality, there's no outcome to these charges. So where does that leave us?
Mr. McBride, let's move on to recent developments.
Okay.
You want your job back. There is an acting head of IPID that has just been appointed. Parliament says there's a breakdown in the relationship between you and Police Minister Bheki Cele. Do you think your contract was not renewed because you were doing your job?
Well, I think the first issue, it's not about any claim from me of entitlement to any job.
Your contract expired.
It's not a labor issue.
Yeah.
It's the way in which it was done is contrary to the Constitutional Court judgment and what it means to be independent. A minister cannot, and Minister Cele has admitted in a sense that he cannot unilaterally appoint or not renew or renew on his own. It has to go via the committee. In this particular case, I'm not surprised by the outcome of the committee. It's the same committee that got rid of Dramat and myself earlier. So it doesn't surprise me at all. But it is rich sometimes when you have someone talking on behalf of a particular organization and saying it's the organization's position. In the SCOPA, for example, where they analyze this corruption, where we've made countless presentations, there's unanimity about the good work that IPID has done. And the majority of people in SCOPA are from the ruling party. And all of them support us in the work that we've been doing. Yet in the same parliament, in another committee, others find problems with it. And just lastly, it's the fact that there's a relationship breaking down between myself and the minister, if that is indeed the case, that's got nothing to do with my job. I'm not an employee of the minister. I'm there as a head of an independent organization. And part of the independence is independence for the head.
But serious allegations were made against you. Part of the reasoning that the police minister had given was about alleged documents that had been leaked, allegedly by yourself, to the likes of private investigator Paul O'Sullivan, pertaining to the work that IPID is doing, and basically issues relating to irregular pushing up of your salary and a host of other things. What do you have to say to that? Because I know you had also gone onto the issue of saying those issues had been ventilated. A complaint that was laid against you previously had also been withdrawn. Those are serious allegations that are being made against you. And quite frankly, the police minister doesn't trust you.
Well, it's not up to him to trust or not trust. If you make allegations, and the allegations have been dealt with, now the allegations as the reasons ex post facto given by the minister to Parliament, none of those reasons were used by the committee or that portion of the committee that took a decision not to renew my contract. None of those. All the reasons that they used were reasons that came in ad hoc and they made up as they went along. Now, having allegations, we have the president of the country, an inquiry or an investigation started by the public protector. That doesn't mean the president did anything wrong. It just means someone decided in terms of their powers to start an investigation. You can't run a country by mere allegations. Otherwise, we'll make allegations left, right, and center so that we don't face accountability. So we just accuse those who are investigating us. You must not forget that Minister Cele was the National Commissioner of the same police, including General Phahlane, who was their boss, of some of the same crimes that we are investigating. And he was dismissed for similar conduct that we are responsible for investigating. I cannot, as an investigator, bury my head in the sand and forget about that.
Right. Johan, let's bring you in there very quickly. I'm quite disappointed because we are running out of time. I would have loved to ventilate other issues, but the entire debacle itself, where the police minister is basically saying that he doesn't trust, he believes there's a breakdown in the relationship between the two, and Mr. McBride basically saying that he has no right, basically, in this instance, because he needs to do his work without a fear or favour.
Griselda, we can talk about it for a long time. Just going back to the Constitutional Court judgment in 2016, and the issues dealt with in terms of independence. And the court made a distinction between political accountability on the one hand and political interference on the other hand. Our problem here is that why the haste with which this whole issue now was dealt? The minister wrote to Mr. McBride... You mean
removing Mr. McBride?
Yes, or not renewing his contract. He wrote a letter to him on, I think, the 16th of January. But both the minister and the portfolio committee must have been aware that the contract will be running out for a long, long time. Why wait? Then also, if you look at the annual report of IPID, where the minister says he's happy with the work done by IPID and IPID's management, then in January he says he's no longer happy. So where's the change?
All right. Gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all we have time for this evening. Thank you very much for your time. Of course, the acting National Police Commissioner, former acting National Police Commissioner, Phahlane, who's already left us. He joined us, of course. He says he's done nothing wrong. Mr. McBride, of course, questioning why his contract was not renewed. And you, Dr. Berger, saying, of course, that all of this was done with haste. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for this evening. I'm Griselda Lewis. Thank you very much for joining us here on Unfiltered. We'll be back again next Sunday. Do join us then.